Welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving a 2010 Porsche 911 Sport Classic. This may be my favorite 997 in existence. Even though it's not a GT car, the Sport Classic is incredibly rare. They only made 250 of these, none of which were exported for sale in the United States. This one has since been federalized and lives here in Massachusetts, although we don't know where it's going because it is for sale and it may fetch an alarming sum of money. So what is the Sport Classic? Well, this is the first car out of the Porsche exclusive manufacturer department. And it's a limited run, sort of one size fits all. There's really no options on this car. What you see is what you get. It starts as a Carrera S, but it gets beautiful mechanical and cosmetic goodies and upgrades. So for power, we have a 3.8 liter naturally aspirated flat six, but it makes 408 horsepower with its exclusive power package, a little more than the Carrera S, and it's a bit wider. So this gets some wide fenders, I believe 44 millimeters wider than the Carrera S. And then, of course, incredible bumpers and bodywork set this apart. It's very subtle. Anyone who knows 997 sees this and says, that's different. I think this front lip does a lot of work in making the car look particularly wild. But of course, the Sport Classic Gray, the standard color, the only color you could get these in, definitely sets it apart. It's sitting on these 19-inch Fuchs-style wheels, or Fuchs, or however you'd like to correct me to say it. And these I love because I have Fuchs on my Porsche 911, my air-cooled 88, and it's actually the same style with the black inlay and the polished lip. I think it looks incredible. And gluing us to the road up front is a 235 section tire, and in the rear a 305. There's very subtle contrast with the stripes that go up over the roof, and the roof is actually particularly exciting because it is a subtle double bubble. You almost don't notice it unless you're told, but I believe, according to PTSRS, my buddy Will, he said that this roof is actually one of the reasons they did not homologate this for the US market. It may have just required additional crash testing. Around back, this is where we start to really see the inspiration from the 73 RS with the iconic ducktail. And this has become sort of a regular feature on a lot of people's custom 911s. If you're building your own, or you're upgrading your own, or you're trying to go for your own style, this really came back into play after this Sport Classic. Inside, this is where you can start to tell where a lot of money was spent. First, you get the door sills, this chrome, the 911 Sport Classic, limited edition, number 148 of 250. And let's start with the doors. Leather, and this gorgeous fabric down here. Everything makes sense. It all works together, and this is espresso leather. And exclusive only to the Sport Classic is this sort of basket weave seat. It's funny because in my head, I remembered these having a special seat, but I always imagined them as houndstooth. They're not. It's this basket weave that I think looks particularly classy. Even the steering wheel is finished in the espresso leather, as well as the dashboard. Pretty much anything you can look at or touch is going to be wrapped in a very pleasing fabric. We get a little taste of our exclusive power kit information back here just because of this carbon fiber intake. Looks really cool, but otherwise, typical 911 fashion, you're really not going to see anything under here, but more than you do in the 991 and 992. And then up front, standard fare as usual for 997, plenty of room for luggage, providing it's only two of you. So you should be good to go. The headlight surrounds are very distinct in this black. And even down here, today, if you wanted to order a Porsche with the headlight washers paint matched, that would cost you big money. You'd have to do CXX options. So this car, sort of in retrospect, gives us a taste of what people will be doing in the future when they're ordering very special cars. And this limited edition Sport Classic tells us a lot about the capabilities of Porsche's department when the money is on the table, because this, I believe, was more expensive than a GT3 RS at the time. And that is a little tough to fathom. So I'm sure there's a million little details of this car that I may have overlooked, but you can let me know in the comments, what is your favorite thing about the 997 Sport Classic, and how does this differ emotionally for you to the current newest 992 Sport Classic? Let's jump in and see how it drives. There's a lot of subtle details that peek out in the interior. This Sport Classic tachometer with the racing stripes down the middle. Then the door handles are even wrapped in leather, in addition to the leather vents from the HVAC system. That is something that I remember people thinking, how silly people are spending so much money on these things, but man, oh man, does this look gorgeous. Jumps right to life with our left-hand ignition. Of course, it is a Porsche after all. And then we get a big old handbrake. Man, this is a very substantial handbrake to play with, and a 6-speed manual transmission. So let's get out and drive. Despite being essentially a hopped up Carrera S mechanically, that's not a bad thing. The Carrera S is a phenomenal car, and in fact, in a lot of ways I prefer it to the turbo because of the sound. Listen to this. It evolves through the rev range, and NA, naturally aspirated Porsches, are just the way to go. They are. And sure, it's not as fast as a 2RS or a turbo or a 3RS, but I think basing this on a Carrera S was the right call because it really suits the nature of a fun canyon carving beauty that can be taken out and used at full tilt on the street. Love the nature of a 911, and this is the right size. 997 at the time seemed like an appropriate size. Now it's like the perfect Goldilocks zone. Everything today is so wide, so big. We're going to take this at a nice angle because I don't know how low this lip is. We don't have a nose lift. Oh, we're golden. So there you go. No nose lift needed if it can take that. The exhaust just isn't in your face shouty, but it's classy, subtle, and meaningful. This is a gentleman's car for sure. And the steering, this is magical. This is like the last of the hydraulic racks in 911s. It tells you everything. It's weighted just dead on to be a sports car, but also very usable and daily drivable. Yeah, we'll not take that catastrophe waiting to happen. You go right on ahead. It doesn't shift like a GT car. It shifts like a Carrera S, and I need to adapt to that. Because like everything about the car kind of tells you, ooh, I'm hardcore. Except it's a slightly heavier flywheel. It feels, I mean, I'm not speaking from knowledge. It just feels like there's a little more patience involved, and I need to give it that. think people don't give enough credit to the Carrera S, and that's actually an argument I want to make with this car, is that 911s in pretty much any specification, any trim level, are phenomenal and plenty quick. So while you won't be blown away like maybe that Camaro has, 500 pound-feet of torque or something, this is a really well-balanced machine that just makes me so happy. And in Sport Classic trim, to me, I just think this is the ultimate expression of these 911s. Be quiet is his plate. I like that. Oh, and he's got really mean red angel eyes. Oh my goodness. It's a ZL1 too, so that is just a pure monster. These brakes being somewhat early PCCBs are really nice for this street. I was expecting them to be a little more persnickety, but Porsche I feel like dialed in their ceramics better than any of the high-end brands early on. Because if you get into a Ferrari or McLaren, those early cars, they always feel like you gotta get some heat in them before they function, and this just works. You gotta do it. You can really feel the impact on weight transfer in these 997s on throttle. I mean, this isn't an enormous amount of power, but it's plenty, and you can tell that the front end gets a bit light when you're wide open. And it feels like there's a big power jump. Like, it feels like I get hit with it kind of around that 6,000 RPM mark. Maybe we'll look back on this and watch it and tell you exactly where it was, but it definitely feels faster than any Carrera S I've ever driven. So that's definitely going for it. This feels like Sport Classic weather. Driving around these New England back roads with the foliage changing for fall. It's a cool day, but it's still warm enough for windows down, despite the fact that I'm not doing that because I don't want to blow out your ears with wind noise. But, that's where I think this car fits in, because it isn't a track star, despite the fact that it is a sports car. Those are different things. And of course, I love driving a GT3 or a GT3 RS. I think they're phenomenal. But you always feel like you're kind of wasting miles driving them around in situations like this, because they want to be pinging off redline at 8,000 RPM. They want to be at full tilt, just destroying Cup 2s at a G everywhere. This, however, is an incredible expression of what Porsche is capable of and what Porsche became capable of. Today, Porsche is kind of renowned for its customizable options. And if you're a customer who's a VIP or someone with a lot of money that they just want to say, hey, I want that color and I'll spend $17,000 to get that PTS thing, then sure, they'll take it. But that wasn't always known. And it seems like commonplace knowledge now that you can optimize or customize or however you want your 911 to look, you can do it. But back then, not everyone was aware. And despite the fact that there's only 250 of these in existence, it was like the shot heard around the world. Sorry, I should have done that while we were in Lexington, but we're close enough. This car shows off that a 911 is not just a black or silver sports car for a lawyer. It says that, hey, I'm tasteful and we can do things that others can't, or that others won't do for you. And this exclusive department of Porsche has really blown up to become their reputation beyond just, we are not going to stop on these tracks, but we're going to give him a ton of space. Beyond being a phenomenal sports car in driver, What are you doing, buddy? Oh my God, dude, what are you doing? Oh, no respect, man. Absolutely no respect. But we got to stay cool, because if you get angry when you're driving these cars, then you get defensive, then you're running on adrenaline and cortisone, and it just isn't good for the final product, because that's when you crash. Anyway, back to my point. I think this car is just a beautiful precursor to what Porsche kind of becomes. And so whether this is a car that you would own because it's your favorite looking or best expression of a 997, we're going to wait, blind corner, yep. Or it's a car that you believe tells the story of the 911 and Porsche's capability as a factory and what their reputation becomes. Either way, this plays a really important role, and their values are very high, and I think they're high for that reason, despite the fact that it is incredibly rare and only 250 examples were made. People kind of love to poke fun at limited edition cars because they say, well, they're just a money grab. But this one I really feel like isn't. I really feel like this car is a showcase and a showpiece. I do genuinely wish we could like hammer on these roads, but there's usually cyclists and hikers and people, and so we can enjoy the scenery, but we do have to be respectful of like other people using a public road. It's not just for us. Please don't drop a tree on a rare 911. Oh boy. Porsche has continued to move the engine as far forward as possible without being mid-engine, and they've made the cars more and more capable, but they lose a little bit of that rear-engine 911-ness that exists. Now, it's not fully gone. I'm not saying like, oh man, the 992 doesn't feel like a 911. It certainly does. But the 997, I feel like, is the peak of the generations where it still feels a bit old school while having all of the modern tech and amenities. And this is, I think, where in the future everyone's going to be after 911s from the 997 generation. These speak to everybody from a style standpoint. They speak to everyone from a drivability standpoint and a mechanical standpoint. You know, there's no turbos unless you get a turbo. The naturally aspirated cars sound fantastic. They drive fantastic. And the tactility of the driving experience is pretty high for a modern car. I guess I'm gonna sit in traffic in a probably close to $500,000 car. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.